Welcome to UOWD On-Air, another edition in our podcast series. Today, our title is Psychology in the Age of AI. I'm Feras Hamza. I'm the head of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Wollongong. And I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today two colleagues, one of them a colleague in Wollongong in Dubai here, Dean of School of Business, Professor Payyazhi Jayashree. And we have a colleague who's flown all the way from Wollongong in Australia, Dr. Simone Favelle, Program Director International Psychology.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I like always to start this, of course, as the head of the School of Humanities, I always have to do this little spiel on behalf of the humanities. In an age of, rapidly developing technology, and technology that can compute an enormous amount and has so much algorithmic power, I think a lot of the traditional STEM vocations will probably be automated in the near future. And I always like to think that there's always a space for the humanities and social sciences to contribute. But I know that parents are usually a bit anxious, or they're cautious about their, perhaps in this region more than other parts of the world, cautious about their children pursuing a non-STEM subject. So I want to think about whether psychology sits in the middle somehow. It's a kind of science, but its roots are in the humanities. So I wonder if we can ponder that. Is it, Simone, if I start with you, what would you say psychology really is?
It is a science, as you say, but it's a science of human behaviour. So it works why people behave the way that they do, but it's approaching those kind of ideals with the scientific method. So we need data, we need empirical investigation. We use these things to try and help us understand why it is we do the things that we do.
Do you think, Jaya, you're somebody who's studied psychology, or is Dean of the School of Business and have been in the world of business for a long time. Do you remember was it as an undergrad that you did your psychology as well as your doctoral studies?
Yes, so I did my undergrad in psychology honors. And then I went on to do a master's in applied psychology, and then I did a PhD in organizational behavior. So I'm very much rooted in the space of psychology.
Was it a personal choice, or was it supported by family or friends or parents at the time, or do you remember?
Absolutely. And I was a science student in school.
Right.
So it was an intentional choice for me, because I was very interested in understanding a little bit more about human behavior. I think understand a little bit more about the reflective processes. I did not, before I went into psychology, I did not know that we would be spending intensive hours studying statistics and scientific methodology and, research, which is I think there was a lot of emphasis on statistics and research. This is what I remember from my undergrad days. And we also had an opportunity to study, of course, various areas in psychology. It is a long time ago, but I think I did study child psychology, physiological psychology, clinical psychology. And at that time, of course, there was an emphasis on industrial psychology. And we did have a thesis that we needed to do in our final year of undergrad. And I remember studying juvenile delinquents. This was a 1-year research. And that kind of, I think it was a turning point for me, because I realized that I'm cut out more for the organizational side of things, and that's why I chose applied psychologist, chose to specialize in applied psychology at a later stage.
It's interesting, it's all coming back now. I remembered all of your modules suddenly. Before the podcast, you were wondering whether you'd remember.
It's interesting that I do remember, yes. It was an absolutely fantastic learning experience, I must say.
Would you say that as somebody who's worked here in this region for a long time, that parents are would typically parents consider for their children a degree in psychology, or would it be much more of a student choice because of the fascination with psychology?
I'm kind of surprised with this question, because I have seen in countries which are more mature in terms of their higher education systems, psychology is one of the most sought after courses. It is also one of the toughest to get into, because you really need to have entry qualifications which are much higher than which some of the other programs, I would say. So it is really one of the more aspirational courses. Not everybody can get into it, and it's only those who are really good in terms of their demonstrated competence at the school level that have been able to get into psychology in some of the mature economies, I would say. So I would think that there would be a lot of parents who would be interested in sending their young ones to psychology. But of course, students seem to do well when they are themselves interested. So I would think it should be both.
Oh, let's hope they will be. So in that sense, you see it as somehow parallel to law. In that sense, it's one of those that has tough admissions, needs high grades, and kind of stands also kind of aside. In the University of Wollongong, law belongs at the moment in the School of Business, right? It's a faculty of business and law.
Yes, that's right.
Sometimes you find it on its own as a kind of faculty of law. Yes. Sometimes it's an appendage to the humanities and social sciences as it once was. So it's interesting that psychology is one of those that kind of is born out of the humanities, but it's gravitating towards the kind of vocational relevance that you find probably with STEM options. Simone, I know that you teach in an undergraduate of psychology at Wollongong in Australia. What, in your experience, are students typically looking for when they choose to do the undergrad in psychology? What draws them in?
Yeah, there's two main drives I think we find in students, and the first is students are people who want to help other people. So they come in thinking, maybe they have been helped by a psychologist or a counsellor or somebody themselves, or their family has, and they think they want to give back, or they just have a drive to be helpful. They want to be able to support and help other people. Some people have that nature. So I'd say that's one drive. The other is, I think, just a real curiosity for how the brain works. How is it that people tick? I mean, we get a lot of people who have watched things like CSI, and forensic psychology looks very interesting, and criminology. But
you said we should be cautious about assuming mixing forensic psychology with criminology. For those of you CSI aspirants out there, listen carefully to what Simone's about to say.
Forensic psychology is probably what you are looking to do rather than criminology. But yeah, that's another podcast. We can leave that one. But people who are curious about how the brain works, and not just for solving cases, but also just why do people
behave the way that they do,
and why is it that in certain situations people behave the way that they do, or what is going to what drives people. Also, just how does the brain work? I mean, how do we gain knowledge of the world? I mean, we're getting a bit philosophical here, but there's an external world and an internal brain and mind that we're working with, and so understanding how it is that that we make sense of the world around us, both in terms of basic physical objects, that's a table, that's a chair, but also people, and how can you predict or understand their behavior? How do you interact with people? How do you use social, emotional cues? There's so much to understand about people. Like I've said, wherever there's humans, there's a need for psychology. That's where psychology is applicable.
I find that fascinating, that the aspiration to predict human behavior, because of course it has very, very practical sometimes uses, right? I can think of behavior at certain in certain parts of cities or crowded areas when they plan for crowds or traffic control. Can you go through some of the ones that you typically might encounter and give us examples in a class? Why would we want to predict human behavior?
Well, predicting human behavior, it might be in terms of how you relate to other people. Mm-hmm. So if you can predict that, how you perform in an exam, for example, test anxiety is, a really nice example. So if we, can predict how, the body reacts and how stress works and what it does to the body, then if we go, okay, when we do an exam, this is how the mind and the body are going to react. If we can predict what's going to happen, then we can intervene and go, okay, well, here's what we can do, mindfulness, relax, those kinds of things. So that's, I guess, a very concrete example for students who might be listening to this.
In that sense, of course, then psychology can segue nicely into areas such as education, such as social work, of course, counseling. Do you find that you need to tell the students, or how do you tell the students what kind of professions are open to them? Because, of course, when you think of psychology, everybody will think of the kind of the chair, the psychologist's chair, right? But that's just one aspect of what you can do with psychology.
That's right. I mean, a lot of students do come in and enter a psychology degree thinking, I want to be a clinical psychologist or a counsellor and to use a psychology degree to become a psychologist. But the vast majority, actually, of psychology students won't become psychologists. So, for example, I'm not a psychologist. I got a PhD in psychology and I'm in academia, teaching and research. My interest is face recognition and understanding the processes involved there, which is one area, actually, I guess, getting back to your question before, understanding how it is that people recognise faces can help develop algorithms, smart gates at airports and things, understanding how it is that people recognise faces can help us develop algorithms to speed up things like immigration lines at airports.
My Samsung doesn't recognize my face at the moment. Is that the problem that I can take up with you? Or
I'll get
but
on to
I
it.
can see how the biometrics is a whole area of interest. I did want to ask actually because for the student listening, a prospective student who might be listening and thinking,
Sure.
Okay, well, actually, I do want to become a clinical psychologist. What's the pathway for that typically? I mean, in Australia or perhaps internationally?
In Australia, the pathway is a 3-year undergraduate degree, then a 4th year doing an honours year. And that's a thesis, an empirical thesis. So a bit like Jai was mentioning before, you do you work with a supervisor and you collect data, analyse that, write up a thesis.
So there's nothing taught in the 4th year. It's really just a research exercise.
There's coursework as well as but half of the honours year is thesis, a research project, and then the other half is coursework, where you do develop skills in counselling and interpersonal skills and things like that. Okay. And then from there, there's a number of different pathways, but you can do the educational pathway is a master's, a clinical master's, or a clinical PhD, which is essentially a clinical master's plus a PhD thesis, which is a larger empirical thesis.
So it sounds like 3 steps. I mean, in the sense that there's the undergraduate component, the honours year, and the master's or postgraduate qualification.
That's right.
And the clinical hours are done during the postgraduate?
It depends on the program, but yes, there's supervised hours involved in becoming a psychologist in that pathway.
Okay.
And typically universities or institutions will help students with that, so place them and kind of organise those supervision hours.
So that's Jaya, if I can move to you, Prof. Jaya, as we affectionately know her, if we can move to you, because I know that psychology also marries itself well with several majors in business. So typically, I know the program in Wollongong has a major in management, a major in human resources, and also a major in marketing. What do you think is the significance of having training or some foundation in psychology for a business graduate? So somebody is graduating with a business component, a major, but actually knows their psychology as well.
That's such an important question. It's, I think, fundamentally important because business enterprises are comprised of people. Even in the age of AI, automation, augmentation, at the end of the day, we have to become good business leaders. We have to uncover human insights to be able to arrive at the kind of competitive advantage that business needs, right? And psychology essentially prepares the students with a deep understanding of human behavior, which intersects with business in multiple ways, right? Organizational behavior, for example, I was speaking about it. It is just a study of how individuals, groups, and organizations interact with each other, and and impact organizations, which is essentially what every business leader is looking at. How do I create configurations in a manner that is aligned with the strategic imperatives of the organization? How do I ensure that we create an environment where individual groups and the organizational structures and systems and processes are working in a strategically aligned manner to give us competitive advantage? So imagine a student who is doing a double major, for example, in psychology and business. He or she has already got a deep understanding of the human, the mindset essentially, and also a deep understanding of reflection. I think it's both. It's it begins with the self, a deep understanding of the self, a deep understanding of the surroundings, which I think gives you an enormous competitive advantage because. For example, today we have been talking about design thinking, just to take one example, over a decade, more than a decade now. And design thinking essentially is a human-centered approach to problem solving, right? A traditional approach is, let's define problems, let us generate alternatives, let us try and arrive at solutions. But a design-centric approach would say that, hey, but what about the problem itself? Have you really uncovered the genuine insights that can create a difference to the human life, right? In order for us to be able to do that, we have to have deep empathy for the human beings within their own context. It's not about sitting in the cozy confines of an air-conditioned office and coming up with a solution that I think will help people around, right? People's stories are important. People's authentic, an understanding of people's authentic contexts are important for us to be able to uncover the human insights, which is absolutely fundamental for us to define the problems. The rest of the things is relatively easy, I would think. Generating alternatives is easy, but defining problems is the crucial part, right? So I think what psychology teaches us is really this ability to uncover human insights through various. It does it scientifically, as Simone mentioned. It is not something that we just
sit and use on.
Yes, there is a scientific methodology, exactly, right? So there is a methodology involved. Psychology teaches deep analytical skills. Research skills, as we said, which is absolutely fundamental to any business person today, right? So psychology teaches us, like I said, from problem solving to problem finding, which I personally think is more important to really uncover the human insights, right? So what are the kind of areas in which psychology can take you to? If supposing you do an undergrad in psychology, you would be able to then be, I think, quite definitely at a stronger space to move into HR, because HR is about making sure that you are, you're having the right people with the right skill sets, with the right attitudes. Exactly. And the psychological well-being,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's interesting how, and then that's reflected, I assume, in the kind of changing nomenclature of HR offices to people and culture.
To people and
it's
culture.
Interesting that, yeah.
But it is fundamental because HR is about people and culture. But even this culture building process, which is so important to organizations, right? That culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker said many moons ago. Now, what does that mean? Culture is a long march. It is not something that, I say by 15th June 2025, I'm going to change the culture of the organization. It does not happen that way. You need to have a deep empathy for the context within which you operate, for the people within the organization, for the strategic alignment processes, right? And that grounding, I think, psychology can give you. It therefore gives you a definite advantage. Another point that I wanted to make is about change readiness. We are in a very very disruptive era. I mean, in organizations, almost every organization is going through the entire gamut of automation to augmentation, which essentially disrupts the known elements. It disrupts the habits that we are so comfortable with, which essentially means that a student with this kind of a dual understanding of psychology and business, for example, would certainly be an advantage to make sense of this chaos around us. But in a leadership role, you would perhaps be at a little bit of an advantage, because you would be able to navigate the change around you in a manner which is probably required in today's world, right? So the change readiness at an individual level,
resilience
yes,
comes into,
resilience, but also transforming organizations through sense giving in a more constructive manner. You see, and change management is a big field altogether. So one of the professions that that psychology students with an understanding of business can move into is to become management consultants, change consultants, and there is a lot of opportunities for students in that area. Another area is marketing, because marketing again, is understanding consumer behavior, uncovering human insights to come up with those products, those services. And today we talk about the experience economy. How can I make sense of the experience economy if I do not understand human behavior and human beings, right? So I would think psychology is that one area which really prepares you with the fundamental knowledge. You still have to do a lot of work outside of your undergrad, but I think it really gives you an advantage to move into multiple areas in business.
Thank you for summarizing, I guess, or reminding us so eloquently about what we tend to think is a very transactional sector. The business sector as being cold and very much about numbers and really just transactional in that sense. Depends so much on emotional content, and that emotional content is the psychological well-being of organizations.
I was just going to say, it reminds us that you not everybody is going to react the same way to the same situation and context. And so, because if that was the case, Jai, you'd be out of a job, because businesses would only have to do, there would be one thing, it'd be black and white.
Yes.
That's what you do, but that's not life, that's not people. And you need to understand that some people are going to approach the same situation in very different ways. Now, why are they going to do that? Even understanding that people will approach a given situation, that might be the backbone of a particular business or, particular job that you're doing. Understanding that different people are going to approach that in different ways, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, that you can harness those differences and appreciate that you don't, keep on trying to bang a round peg into a square hole. So it's very important to understand, behavioural antecedents for given situations.
Simone, before we kind of come to a close, I just wonder if I can confront you with a pop quiz. What are the major areas of psychology that students would typically study? So they're as the kind of sub-disciplines of psychology.
I mean, that's one of the really interesting things about the thing about psychology. When I started, I didn't really know that much about it. And when I saw the breadth of topics, it was just amazing. I mean, I studied engineering in high school, and I thought that I was going to be going into engineering. I went, oh, hang on a second, I think I want to help people. And psychology looks like it could be interesting. Let's do that. And then I got there and went, oh, it is a science. And I was doing subjects like, cognition, visual cognition, perception. How do we process information, visual information? How does memory work? I'm like, ooh, this is for me. But it's a science. And so I use my science skills, scientific method, applying it to human behavior, which is visual, which people don't necessarily think of automatically when you think psychology.
But that's where all the fun is, right? Looking at the sizes of glasses and the shapes of balls and...
That's right. But so that's one area, cognition, how memory works, how vision works, senses, sensation and perception. There's psychopathology, what people might think of as kind of clinical disorders, mental health kind of concerns. There's personality theories, how is it the different personality might affect... might explain behaviour and also might explain how people behave in relation to others. Just trying to think of all the... Well, there's statistics. There is quantitative side to... Because you need to understand the data. I mean, psychology is an empirically driven discipline, so we need to understand what we do with the data. We need to measure. I mean, that's one of the really interesting things. How do you measure human behaviour? I think that's a really interesting question, and probably something that people in the business realm would really like to get a hold on as well. So there's assessment. How do you assess and measure? There's biology, there's brain imaging, psychophysiology.
It's really quite varied. Actually.
There's so many things, and I'm sure I've left out developmental,
of course,
psychology,
right?
Social psychology. Yes, I'm leaving out the.
I've always thought observing children and cats teaches you a lot about the animal behavior, the kingdom to which we ultimately belong to. But developmental psychology is fascinating, right? So
absolutely, and that actually features in our program with features at both second and third year levels, and that's
What I take from all of this is that the psychology is, as an undergrad, is extremely it's kind of wide spectrum, very varied and colorful and rich, and actually makes you it's a versatile degree to have, because as you, Jaya, were talking about in the business context, there's so many things that you can do, but also makes you somehow versatile. I mean, makes you able to kind of understand human behavior and manage yourself at the individual level. I think that's quite fascinating. I always, I'd like to wrap up with just some final thoughts. So in the age of AI, do any of you, like either of you, have any concerns? Can you think about the title of our podcast, which is Psychology in the Age of AI? I mean, what I get from both of you is it's understanding human psychology is going to be more important than ever before. And if AI is doing anything, it's trying to mimic human behavior. So I wonder what the connection there is between AI and a need for more psychology. But any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, I tell students that what they're going to need to do is to distinguish themselves from AI. So think about what it is that you can offer that an algorithm can't.
Yes.
Well,
that's what they always remind us. But I mean, I'm with you.
Yeah, and so there's that creativity. And the other thing is that whatever AI produces, that output has to be used by people. So there always has to be a human in the loop. That role, what that human in the loop is doing, is obviously going to change. It already has. Again, looking at my general area of face recognition, it was maybe only 5 years or so ago that humans were better at face recognition, particularly in the difficult tasks. So if at a particular angle, or if the image was not good quality, humans were the better. They were the expert face recognizers, and that's not the case anymore. There are still some conditions in which humans are better than computers at recognition. But so it is interesting. AI can be, and so humans would come in and be able to kind of override, if you like, AI. But yeah, that has already changed. But yeah, if I think too much about it, AI does kind of worry me a bit as well. Another bit of research that I'm doing actually with an honours student is looking at how AI-generated faces are now indistinguishable from human faces, which is quite a worry. But there are actually differences. There are we're looking at ways that we can
that's interesting.
Can actually discriminate, but also it's just knowledge that is the case, so that it makes people aware that, to question, is that an actual human or
to have
not?
that question in the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jaya, any thoughts on this whole AI and psychology?
AI is intersecting not only with psychology, but I think AI is here to stay, and all of us, it's part of our conversations now. I think we really do need to understand that in the age of AI, the why becomes more important than the what and the how. Because we have to, AI in some way, an understanding of psychology in the age of AI, because your specific question was related to that. I think it helps us to use AI or engage with AI more responsibly, because human beings are involved, right? Because the implications are for human beings. Yes. And I think that's fundamental, really, because AI, I don't see AI as a threat at all. I see it as, I see AI as, as an enabler. How do you create those models where AI and human beings can intersect in ways that that leads to more innovation, is the space that I occupy. But having said that, there is so much to learn, and I think we need multidisciplinary teams when it comes to understanding how to leverage the power of AI in meaningful, responsible ways. We need to do research in interdisciplinary teams, which includes psychologists, which includes, quantum physicists, which includes anthropologists. I would like to think that is the space that we need to be moving into. And at an institutional level, I think universities in particular have a very, very significant role to play in the kind of grants that we give away, in the kind of research that we support. I would think AI definitely has implications for human behavior. So psychology, if with a more deeper understanding of human behavior, would certainly be a great strength in utilizing or AI in more responsible and meaningful ways, and also to understand that in the world of AI, it is the why questions that matter more than the what and the how. The what and the how can be mimicked, but the why human beings still need to be, in the lead there, I would like to think, yeah.
So I'm going to show you exactly how artificial my intelligence is by closing on the following note. In my area of history of the region, history of the Middle East, and it's always thought of Arabia was part of a kind of very separate world from the Greco-Roman world of the Mediterranean. But in fact, there's so much overlap that even the word psyche, which means breath of life, which is the word for psyche, right, is the same word in Arabic for the word of soul. So you have the breath of life, soul, nafas, nafs. So I thought I'd end on that note to show you that, somehow the heart of all of these things is a recognition that there's something elusive about what makes human beings tick, and we're still trying to find out what that is. So, but I really want to just enjoy the conversation. I hope you did. Thank you, Dr. Simone Favelle, for flying all the way from Wollongong to be with us during this week, and for also taking time to do the podcast. Professor Payyazhi Jayashree, our Dean of School of Business. Thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having us.
And thank you all for listening. This has been UOWD On-Air.